So we're going to look at the Allegory of the Cave. We're going to go through it one time. I want to show you guys a documentary today, but we only had 45-minute classes, and the documentary is an hour. So when I see you guys again tomorrow, we'll go over the quote, and then we'll look at the documentary, and then we'll get back to this on Thursday. But the documentary is about Socrates, not about the Allegory of the Cave specifically, but it's about about Socrates. So, Allegory of the Cave, from Plato's Republic, and Socrates is speaking with his friend Glaucon. Glaucon, by the way, is Plato's uncle. You know, not important information, but whatever. It's worth noting. So Socrates says, "And now, let me give you an example so we can see how enlightened or unenlightened we really are." So he begins right off the bat by talking about the purpose of this allegory. And you're going to notice, by the way, again, it sounds like we're in the middle of a conversation, and we are, because this is happening in the middle of a book. He's picking this up from the Republic. So the allegory is not a standalone text. It's taken out of a context. And that's why we spent so much time last time, giving you the context of where this comes from. And he tells us also, of course, what the purpose of this is. So by enlightened, what does enlightened mean? Come on. If I say someone's enlightened, it means
they're happy.
They're wise.
Excited.
Wise.
Wise, yeah. Enlightened is wisdom. Enlightened is wisdom. So if you're enlightened, it means, like, in other words, the light's been turned on and now you can see. And if the light is off, then you're blind and you can't see. So he begins by stating, let me give an example so we can see how enlightened or unenlightened we really are. Let me give an example so we can see what we know and what we don't know and how we know it. Imagine human beings living in a cave. The cave has a mouth open towards the light, and the light reaches all along the cave. These people have been in the cave since birth and have their legs and necks chained so they cannot move. They can only see in front of them because of the chains. They can't even turn their heads around. They've been forced since birth to always stare forward. Above and behind them there's a fire blazing at a distance, and between the fire and the prisoners is a low wall, like the screen which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show puppets. Right, so we have a scene here. What's the scene look like? Describe it.
Cave.
We're in a cave.
People chained up from the neck and legs.
Yeah, so people are chained up and their legs, they can't move. And what else do we have?
Fire blazing behind you.
Yeah, so the fire's back there somewhere. Yeah, and they can only look straight forward. And yeah, there's a low wall also behind them. So you can think of like the fire being over here. We have a low wall, and then they're chained, always looking forward right here. Okay. So far, so good. Yeah. Okay. So Glaucon says, "I see." By the way, we all need friends like Glaucon. In fact, in all of Socrates' dialogues, this is typically what it looks like. The person he's talking to, I agree. Of course. Nothing else by Zeus. They'd have to. Certainly. Far truer. True. Certainly. Certainly. Clearly. They don't really put up much of a fight against him. We all need friends like that. We also need the opposite in our friends. So Glaucon says, "I see." It's funny. In the cave, I see. Now, imagine men walking back and forth behind the wall, carrying all sorts of vessels and statues and figures of animals made of wood and stone and various materials which appear over the wall. Some of the passing men are talking, while others are silent. This is a strange image, and they are strange prisoners. You'll see these prisoners are just like us. These prisoners see only their own their own shadows, or the shadows of one another, which the fire throws on the wall of the cave. So now we have an understanding that there's an analogy that he's making here, that the prisoners represent us. And notice he doesn't say you, he says us. This is us. And so you've got this person now who stands with a fire behind them. And what does he, of course, see on the wall then if the fire's behind him and he's standing here, staring straight forward? What does he see?
Shadow.
He sees his own shadow. And then if there's people who are passing back and forth, say over here, let's say, and the fire's back here, and they see the little images, those shadows are also cast up on the wall. And also, as we're going to see, he hears other people as well inside of the cave. So if you're aware at that point, there are other people. Now, if you hear voices, and you see those other shadows up on the walls, where can you imagine those voices are coming from?
The chained people.
Yeah, we know that they're chained though. So what representation do we have of the chained people? the
They
represent?
can only see their own shadow.
Yeah, so you can see your shadows and the shadows of others, yeah. And so where would you imagine those voices are coming from? Yeah, there's other shadows. So the idea is that it's very much like what you have here. We can see these things on the wall. We can imagine that the voices are coming from the shadows and all that. Of course, how could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads? Of the objects which are being carried around in front of the fire, they would only see the shadows, right? Certainly. And if the prisoners were able to talk with each other, wouldn't they believe that they were talking about what was actually in front of them? About the shadows being projected onto the wall? They would have to. And suppose further that the prison had an echo from which came from the other side. Wouldn't the prisoners believe that when one of the passersby spoke, that the voice they heard came from the shadows in the wall? Nothing else, by Zeus. To them, the truth would be literally nothing but the shadows of the images. They would believe that the shadows were the real world. They would certainly have to be. Now, imagine what would naturally follow if the prisoners are released from their chains. At first, when any of them is liberated and compelled to stand up and turn his neck around and walk toward the light, he will suffer sharp pains. Not only will his neck hurt, but the glare will hurt his eyes, and he'll be unable to see the shadows. So you got this person, they're chained up. Now imagine if someone's unchained, and it says that they're compelled, not allowed to, but they're forced to turn around and look. So what's the first thing that they're going to notice? Yeah, the light, the fire. And how's that going to be on their eyes? Yeah, it's going to blind them. It's going to be like, sheesh. For those of you who've seen The Matrix, if you remember, there's a scene where after Neo is taken out of his little pod and he's on a table, he has all those pins stuck in him. And Morpheus is standing above him, and Neo finally opens up his eyes, and he's just squinting. He asks Morpheus, why do my eyes hurt? And Morpheus says, you've never used them before. That's the idea. You've only ever used the eyes to stare at the shadows. So when you turn around and you see fire, then, of course, it's blinding you. Now, for those of you who are picking up on the analogy already, fire provides light. So if you make that connection between enlightenment and fire, what does the fire represent? Knowledge, yeah. So when a person is now turned around and they get to see things as they truly are, it can be blinding to the soul. Now, imagine someone, a teacher, saying to this prisoner that what he's been seeing his entire life was an illusion. But now that he has been freed and is walking toward the fire, his eyes turn toward the real world, and is now able to see things as they truly are. What do you think he'll say? Further, imagine that his teacher is pointing to the objects as they pass over the wall and requires him to name them. Won't he be confused? Will he not believe that the shadows he formerly saw are truer than the objects his teacher is showing him? Far truer. And if he's forced to look straight at the light, will he not have a pain in his eyes which will make him turn away back to the objects that are easier for him to see, such as the shadows, and which will be easier to look at than the objects at which his teacher wanted him to look? True. It gets a little convoluted there. So the idea is now if you imagine which one's going to be more comfortable for this person, to look at the fire and to see the actual people themselves, to see the prisoners, to see the objects that are passing between the fire and the person. Which one will be more comfortable for them to look at? That thing as it really is, or to go back and see the shadows? You know? Which one's more comfortable?
See the shadows.
See the shadows. You have to go back to the old ways and see the shadows. Far truer. And if he is forced to look straight at the light, will he not have a pain in his eyes which will make him turn away back to the objects that are easier for him to see, such as the shadows, and which will be easier to look at than the objects at which his teacher wanted him to look? Far true. And imagine once more that he is reluctantly dragged up a steep ascent and is forced into the presence of the sun. Is he not likely to be angry, irritated, and won't his eyes hurt even more? When he gets closer and closer to the light, he will not be able to see anything outside of the cave. Not immediately. He would need to get used to the light. So now the images, he's being dragged forcibly out of the cave and being forced to look at the real world the way that it really is. Exactly. His eyes would need to adjust to the side of the world outside the cave. First, he will see the shadows best, the shadows of the trees, buildings, and so on. Next, he would be able to see the reflection of objects in the waters. Then he would be able to look at the objects themselves. Finally, he will be able to gaze upon the light of the moon and the stars in the heavens. Won't he be able to see the sky and the stars by night better than the sun or the light of the sun by the day?
Yeah.
Certainly. Last of all, he will be able to see the sun, and not mere reflections of the sun in the water, but rather he will see the sun in its proper place, and will contemplate the sun as it truly is. So after a while, he comes out of the cave, being able to look up at the sky, or forget about it. He can look down at the ground, and he can see the shadows on the ground. And okay. Then after his eyes adjust more, he'll be able to go to like a lake. He'll be able to see the reflection of trees and things in the lake. And after some time, he'll finally be able to look at the world. And after longer than that, he'll be able to look up at the sun and see the sun as it really is, in order to look at the source of light. Certainly. Won't the former prisoner then reason that the sun is what's responsible for the season and the years, and that it is the guardian of all that is in the visible world, and in a certain way the cause of all things which he and his friends in the cave have been looking at all these years? Clearly, he would first see the sun and then reason about him. And when he remembered his old home in the cave and how his fellow prisoners were still chained up in there, don't you think he'd be happy for himself because he learned the truth? And pity them because they were still staring at shadows, erroneously believing they represented the real world? Certainly he would. And if the prisoners had contests among themselves to see who were quickest to observe the passing shadows, and to name which of them was on the wall, and which came after, and which would come next, and who were therefore best able to predict the future, do you think that the former prisoner would care about winning the contest? Or do you think he would agree with the poet Homer, who wrote, "Better to be the poor servant of the poor master and suffer, than to think and live like them"? And now we kind of go back to what she was asking at the beginning, how do you connect at that spiritual level? And I was talking about when you come to an understanding about a lot of things in life, all those other silly things just don't matter anymore. So the idea is that now that person is going back into the cave, let's say, now they've seen life as it really is. And so if they see those shadows up on the wall, they won't be as quick to be able to point out which shadow is which object and all that. And that's going to make more sense when I see you guys tomorrow. We're going to do an experiment on that. But the idea is that even if the person can't recognize the shadows on the wall, and it's not going to matter to them. What they're more interested in is the thing as it truly is. Not what it looks like to the world, but what it actually truly is. And you won't care, and the idea is you wouldn't care about the opinions of people who are fixated on the shadows. Now, it's an important point. When I say don't care about it, I don't mean that there's a sense of like, I don't care about those people, they're stupid anyway, and all that stuff. It's more of a matter of, you want to stare at the shadows, but that stuff doesn't interest me. Those things just won't interest you anymore. And those kinds of silly things that most people are involved in. But it's an important point to understand that they're a prisoner just like you used to be. So you wouldn't develop a contempt for them either. It wouldn't just be like, oh man, they're so stupid, I hate them. It'd be more pity, which is why you return to the cave. So Glaucon says, yes, I think that he would rather endure anything rather than base his life on something he knows isn't true. Imagine once more that the former prisoner is put back into the cave. Wouldn't he have difficulty seeing in the darkness because his eyes were acclimated to the light? To be sure. He got used to the light, and now it would be difficult to see in the darkness. And if someone entered him into that contest before his eyes adjusted to the darkness, wouldn't he look like an idiot because he couldn't name the images on the wall? People would say that he went up out of the cave, that when he came back without his eyes. Wouldn't they say it was better to not even think of going out of the cave? Wouldn't they believe it was better to stay inside? And if a teacher tried to unchain another prisoner and lead him up to the light, wouldn't they accuse him of trying to ruin their life and even try to kill the teacher? No question. Let me explain the allegory, my friend. The cave is the world that we see and experience with our five senses. The light of the fire is the sun. The journey upwards out of the cave is the journey of the soul into the intellectual world. So to go from here up into here. I believe that in our world, the idea of goodness appears last of all, and it is seen only with an effort. And when we do see it, we realize it is the universal author of all things beautiful and right. We then realize that goodness is the parent of light, and the Lord of light in this visible world, and the immediate source of reason and truth in the intellectual world. And that this is the power upon which he who would act rationally, either in public or private life, must focus his efforts. So, hopefully as you read through that, and we'll read through it more detailedly tomorrow, hopefully you're seeing kind of the analogy starting to play out. The idea being that when we're down here, we're seeing the mere reflections. I was saying before that everything on this, in this physical realm is an imitation of what's happening up there. Yeah, we're good at seeing it because, well, this is what we're used to. We've been here, we've been chained since birth. But we have the ability to, you kind of using the soul, go up and experience the world as it truly is. Now again, you can't do that with your five senses because the five senses are corruptible. And how do you transcend into a spiritual realm when you're with your body? It's not possible. You've got to leave the body behind. You've got to only, the closest thing that we have to approximate that is going to be our psyche, our mind, our soul. And that only happens through contemplation, through reasoning. So this is why Socrates believes that all true knowledge comes not through the five senses, but through your soul, which experiences the world. And this is how it is that you can see a person differently from everybody else, because you connect at that spiritual level, that soul level. You see their soul for who they really are, versus what everybody else sees, perhaps. And then the idea is that once you kind of experience this and you know about this, well, now going back to the world, well, a lot of this stuff is just not going to matter, you know. And if you really, if you believe this, in fact, if any of you believe anything at all about the soul, like if you're religious in any way or spiritual or whatever 21st century term you want to attach to it, if you believe that you're spiritual in any way, you can tell yourself if you really are. Look at how you're living. Are you living in such a way that you're absolutely just fascinated by physical things, by material things? You know, are you fascinated by your clothing? Are you all about, you know, trying to get that money and make your moves in silence? And are you trying to get, you know, are you trying to get attention? Are you trying to kind of move up that hierarchy so that you can get love and respect from people? All of those things simply just won't matter anymore if you understand that that's all what happens down here. And once you die, all of that goes away. Now what really matters is making yourself better here. You know, developing your soul in such a way that you get up there. Everything else is, it's dying away, man. It just simply doesn't matter. Is that a hand? So you're creeping up.
So during the weekend, I tripped with a couple of my friends. And I feel like half of the time, I was just thinking about like everything I fucking learned in this class, and it like blew my mind. And everything that you were just talking about, like I feel like I went through.
That's good.
No, but it's just like, I don't know how to explain it. Like it just is. Like everything is just is. I don't really know how to explain it, but.
Yeah, because you're using words to explain a spiritual concept. That's the thing about psychedelics. They tap into a part of your brain that is, well, don't do them, right? Since we're recording here, don't do them, right?
Oh.
But,
no.
yeah, but, just say no, kids. But if you do, yeah, this is what people say, like that psychedelics, apart from any other drug, psychedelics are things that open up parts of your mind that allow you to see things as they truly are. You know, like when Huxley said, when doors of perception are open, we'll see things as they truly are, infinite.
Yeah, it's like there's just a reason behind like everything. Or like there's a meaning, not a reason, but a meaning, like with everything you see. And it just relates to, I guess, your personal unconscious, like it just resurfaces stuff. And it was just, I don't know, I thought it was life-changing.
It is, if you see it this way. You know? Like I said, everything means something if you understand it. If you're sitting there and you, not just to this, but to anything in life, and you're completely shut off from it, well, of course you're going to think it doesn't relate to life in any way because you're not going to connect it to anything in life. But if you do take it seriously, and again, it's an idea that's thousands of years old, man, and that survives for that long, there must be something to it. And the human condition has not changed that much in 2,500 years. We seem to think that Facebook changed everything. It gave us a means for communication, but it didn't change the human condition. And so you can see it in that it relates to a lot of what you would go through on those kinds of things, you know? And you'll see that if you go through those kinds of experiences, like I said, a lot of this stuff is just not going to matter, you know? And if you look at it and you go like, oh, we're all these spiritual entities that interact, and that what really matters are these things up here. It's like, okay, well, you know, let me not like you because of the color of your skin. Or let me, we should not get along because you have more money than I do, or vice versa. Or, oh my God, I can't believe the shoes that person is wearing, It's like there's a correlation we can see. Okay, for example, Mark Zuckerberg, right? The guy's very bright, very bright. And he has a thing that he's known for. He wears all the time. Everybody know what he wears constantly? He always wears a gray sweater, gray hoodie. He just wears a gray hoodie. Now, he has multiple gray hoodies, but he's always wearing the same thing. Why do you think he wears the same thing every day? Because he wants to? What's that?
Saving money.
Sorry?
Saving his money.
Saving his money?
Because it doesn't matter about the material.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. He's focused on developing a social network. You think he has time to stand in front of his closet and go, what should I look like today? That stuff just doesn't matter to him. Now, people will look at that and be like, oh my God, he wears the same thing every day. How can he do that? He's a billionaire. I bet he's not really a billionaire. I bet he's actually poor, but he wears the same thing every day. He doesn't have time for that crap. He's on a mission. He's got someplace he has to be. He just grabs a sweater and he goes. Why does he grab the sweater? Because it's cold. He just grabs the same shoes every day. Why? Because he doesn't have time to sit there and be like, and stare at Nike.com and be like, oh man, I'm gonna custom make some Nikes. I'm gonna watch this and I'm gonna put my birthday on there. Or whatever the hell, Watch, I'm going to change the color of the tongue. I'll be the only one with those shoes. That kind of stuff just won't matter to you anymore. And part of the problem is that we want it to matter to us. Because when we say stuff like that, me saying this to you, even though I hope you understand, I'm not making a value judgment of if you are that person. I'm not sitting going, man, you're stupid. You're focusing on the wrong stuff, man. No, it's not that at all. It's me just narrating the case. I'm just saying, here's what's happening. That stuff is super important to you. For some reason, sometimes when we just say what it is, we get offended by it. Oh, so you're judging me. No, not my life. You deal with your own soul, I'll deal with mine. I can't even comb my hair anymore. You think I got time to judge how you live your life? Too busy trying to, trying to perfect mine. But, we'll be offended by that stuff because, you kind of know it's true. It's a weird thing, and if you like shoes, that's cool, man. Obviously, I don't. It's not my thing. There are people who love cars, man. I've been driving the same car since 2000, man. Mr. Truck. Mr. Truck's my truck, man. Mr. Truck is the only material possession I have. And if I lost Mr. Truck, it would really bother me. I get up in the morning, I go see Mr. Truck, I'm like, what's up, Mr. Truck? Mr. Truck's like, hey, what's up? See, let's go, man. Let's go. Ready to go. When Mr. Truck's engine blows up, I'm going to buy him a new engine, dude. When Mr. Truck breaks down, what do? I fix him. Why? That's what friends do. And now there's a cool thing. I don't have to worry. I don't have to think about what I'm going to buy. What kind of car I'm going to get next. Mr. Truck's always there. I don't have to think about what shoes I'm going to get. I actually have more shoes than any straight man should probably own. And I always grab the same one. Why? Because they're right there. If you look at my closet, I've got stacks and stacks and stacks of T-shirts and shirts and dress shirts and so forth. But I don't wear the same ones over and over again. I just grab the one that's on top. And why is it on top? Because I just washed it. So you find you just start cycling through the same stuff because you keep washing the same 10 shirts and you grab those ones that you wear. Now, if fashion matters to you, you can look at that and just be like, oh, Paul. Look at those shoes. He's never even taken them hiking. But that's if it matters to you. But you're going to find that there are things that simply don't. If you're focused on this stuff up here, this stuff simply won't matter. Here's the problem, though, man. If you're focused on this stuff down here, guess what? You're missing sight of the stuff that's up here. And this is the stuff that's permanent, eternal, not falling away. It's not dying away. And this is who you really are. And so if you feel estranged, if you feel like you're separated out from those kinds of things, that's probably why. This is why when people do the kinds of things that you're describing, they always describe an overwhelming sense of connectedness. Because
especially with the people you do it with. It's like in your mind, all of you guys are just connected into one. I really just have no words to explain it.
I understand. I've done it before, and I can hear green. If that makes sense. If it makes sense to you, it makes sense to you. I can tell you know. But again, because those are the things that connect us. We strip away everything and get down to the fundamental level. The things down here, those are the things that separate us. Oh my God. You wear New Balance instead of Nike? You're driving this car instead of that? You're this class instead of that one? You're this gender, not that one? You're this race and not that one? All of the things down here that don't manifest in the soul, those are all of the things that pull us apart and separate us. All of the things that we share and come together with, are up here. So even if you focus on the things down here, again, you're focusing on the things that pull us apart, including yourself with this duality. So, happy Monday. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? If you'd be kind enough, I'd appreciate it. Pass forward your copies of the Allegory. Keep the anticipation guides, but pass forward the Allegory.